small area, you'll see your thumb would be missing, no? While you're looking just straight ahead. So that is your physiologic blind spot. Okay, so if this is your optic nerve, the size of your optic nerve and then where the blood vessels come out is where we would determine our cup to disc ratio. So the inner portion where we would see the blood vessels coming out of the nerve, so that would be known as our optic cup. And the size or the borders of your disc or the nerve is called your optic disc. So cup to disc ratio is just basically looking at where the vessels come out, do an imaginary circle, and then try to estimate how much percentage this circle occupies the disc. Now, so if we say 0.3, so this means that the size of the cup is about 30% of your optic disc. If we say 0.5, then this would be a little larger, so the cup is about 50% occupying the optic disc. So it's important to take note of the cup to disc ratio because diseases like glaucoma or increase in intracranial pressure can lead to different appearances, no? And then they would determine how much of the nerve is already damaged. Alright, so do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? Rock? Okay, so this is an eggshell view of your eye taken through an MRI. So this is an MRI orbit showing you parts of your eye muscles, and then this structure here is your optic nerve. So this is the optic nerve, and it ends at your optic chiasm. So what do you notice? What do you notice with the optic nerve structure? Is this normal or abnormal? Can I see a raise of hands? If you say this is abnormal, raise your hands. Just a thing. Abnormal? Normal. Nobody's raising hands. Sige. If you believe this is normal, raise your hands. 1, 2, just 3. So there, raise your hands. Normal. Abnormal. Abstain. Okay, so why do you think this is abnormal? It's not straight. It's not symmetric. Okay. So number 1, they say it's not symmetric. Number 2, why do you think this is abnormal? Curved. Say English and you will. Asymmetric. Slanting. What else? Why do you think this is abnormal? Why do you think this is normal? Does this picture show anything normal? We're just talking about the optic nerve, right? So this structure. Why do you think this is normal? Gut feeling. So this is a normal nerve. So it's asymmetric, no, pero we're not sure if the patient was really lying flat. No, so it's hard to tell. But if you look at it, it's about the same. No, it's about similar. Okay, so I think I heard someone say it's not straight. That's why it's abnormal. Okay, but this the optic nerve was not made to be straight, no? So non-binary. So it's the optic nerve was not made to be straight, no? So it has an S-shaped form. Okay? It's not supposed to be straight. It should be a little bit S-shaped or there's some curvature. So the purpose of this, shape, no, is that so that your optic nerve is not very taut or tight, so that when you move your eyes, there's no stretching, no, there's no tautness, no, it does not lead to damage. So your eyes are freely moving, and so the nerve has some allowance. Okay, so that's the reason why it's about S shape. No, so the distance from your globe, the back part of your eyeball to the optic canal, is about 18 millimeters. And so your optic nerve distance, no, from the globe to the optic canal is about 25 millimeters. So there's a 7 millimeters of leeway. That's why it has an S-shaped form or S-shaped size or shape. So it allows the nerve to be freely moving without any damage when you move your eyes. Okay, so those are basically the structures of the eye. Before we continue, do you have any questions or clarifications? So in a CT scan, you're also able to see the nerve, no? But it's more clearly defined if you request for an MRI. So MRI is a better radiologic study if you want to examine the optic nerve. Okay, so if no question, let's move on. Okay. So this is just a photo, nothing much. No, so this just tells you, we're gonna talk next about how your eyes see objects. Okay. So if this was a candle, no, all objects will emit light. No, and light reaching to your eye first passes through the cornea. And so this, if you remember, the cornea has a refractive power, meaning it bends light. So the cornea would be the first structure light passes through. So it would bend the light so that it passes through the pupils. And once it reaches the lens, which is another refractive surface, it also bends the light until the image, no, forms at the retina. So the image that you see would be transported to the retina upside down. And then that image would be translated by the retina, sent to the brain, and it would reflect the image. Okay, so light passes through the cornea, to the pupils, to the lens, and then to the optic nerve. So from the cornea to the pupil, so the light is bent mainly for focusing. The pupil size determines the amount of light entering the eye. The lens further bends the light so that it will be well focused. Then eventually the focus image falls on the retina, which converts these electric signals and sends it to the optic nerve, which will eventually, from the optic nerve will be sent to your brain, and then it will be interpreted into an image. Okay, so I'm not gonna ask you to memorize this, but I'm just gonna show you how it functions. So the retina, as mentioned earlier, is a neurosensory structure. So it functions to convert information from brightness to contrast with the following cells that are important. So number one, you have your photoreceptor cells, you have horizontal cells, bipolar cells, amacrine cells, and ganglion cells. So photoreceptor cells are mainly at the very bottom part, and then the horizontal, amacrine, ganglion, and your nerve fiber layer cells are on the upper part. So what happens is when the light reaches the retina, it touches the inner layer first, but it bypasses all the other layers until it reaches your photoreceptor layer. Okay, so the light will bypass everything until it reaches your photoreceptor layer, and then the photoreceptor layer would transform that light into information, and it would be sent back to the nerve fiber layer, through your horizontal cells, amacrine, bipolar, ganglion cells. So it would go through stages. So once it reaches your nerve fiber layer, then it would be sent to the optic nerve, and then to your brain. So just for physiology purposes, as mentioned earlier, you have rods and cones, which are photoreceptors. So these are depolarized or in a positive state to begin with because of the presence of glutamate, and light would trigger converting your 11 cisretinal to all transretinal in the rhodopsin or photopsin area. Eventually lead to your transducin, then sodium channel, so electrolyte changes happen in the eye, leading to a hyperpolarized state or a negative state, then eventually sending those information to your horizontal and bipolar cells. So once that information is dropped off, glutamate binds back to your rods and cones, and then you're back to square one, having a depolarized state. So you don't have to memorize this, I don't even memorize this, but this is the physiology. Joke, I still know this. So, from your optic nerve, information is sent to your optic chiasm, then eventually it would split to your optic tract, and then to your lateral geniculate body or LGB, which would contain either M cells, P cells, or T cells. So different cells have different function. So your magnocellular cells or M cells receives information for illumination and motion. So M cells, motion. Parvocellular or B cells receive color and fine details. So fine details. And then coniocellular or K cells modulate information. So if you just memorize your M and P cells, M for motion, P for fine and color, and your K cells will be for other information. So once it reaches your lateral geniculate body, it radiates your optic radiations, and eventually ends up at the occipital lobe, the very back part of your eye, which contains your visual cortex. Okay, so information to the eye, cornea, lens, to your retina, optic nerve, crosses to your optic chiasm, eventually sends to your optic tract, stays in your lateral geniculate body, and then depending on what cells that it perceives, it goes through different optic radiations and ends up at the back part of your eye, or the occipital lobe. So any injury or damage in the back part can lead to visual changes. So if you notice in this picture, your fields are colored as blue and orange. So nasal and temporal fields. So the eye is very confusing. It flips images. So what you see in your temporal field goes to the nasal retina. What you see on your nasal field goes to your temporal retina. Okay, so see here, left temporal field is governed by your right nasal retina. Then once it passes to the optic nerve, it's now being transported to the other side. Okay, so information landing on your nasal retina is passed to the contralateral side. Now the temporal retina goes to the same or ipsilateral pathway. So that means if you have a problem on your right optic tract, that means you can have a problem with your left eye as well. So it helps us localize where the disease is. So if your patients say they're not able to see their left temporal field, then we would expect, if we further investigate, then we might find a problem with the right optic tract. Very confusing, right? Okay, so unfortunately, you have to memorize this. How your eye works, which visual fields are affected, and then you have to memorize the pathway so that you're able to identify which optic segment is affected and which leads to which visual field defects. Okay, next are your muscles, also known as your extraocular muscles. Okay, so you have four main rectus muscles: superior, inferior, lateral, and medial rectus. And then you have inferior and superior obliques. So 6 main muscles on the eye, but your levator palpebrae is also part of your extraocular muscles. So basically 7 extraocular muscles. So here you would see the muscle insertions. So each muscle is inserted in different measurements from the eye. Now with your medial rectus having the shortest insertion, which is 5.5 millimeters from your limbus, and your superior rectus having the longest insertion at 7.7. Now, so if we measure a ruler from the limbus and up to 7.7 millimeters, then we would know where the superior rectus muscle insertion is. So this is very important in surgery. So when we do surgery, in order for us to locate the muscles, we don't just blindly dissect and explore. So at least we have an idea where to locate these muscles. If patients have eye injuries as well, lacerations of the eye, it depends on how long the laceration is, then we would also expect damage to extraocular muscles. Okay, so if you notice, it's not a complete circle, it's like a spiral, because it's shorter insertions to longer insertions. So if the origin of your rectus muscles is known as your annulus of Zinn, the insertion is known as your spiral of the lobe. So the imaginary spiral is called your spiral of the lobe. Okay, so the annulus of Zinn is the origin of all rectus muscles. The superior oblique originates from the body of the sphenoid bone. The inferior oblique originates from your maxillary bone, and your levator palpebra superioris originates from the lesser wing of your sphenoid bone. So for your insertions, all rectus muscles insert at your spiral of the lobe. Your superior oblique is inserted just underneath your superior rectus. Your inferior oblique is inserted at the posterior inferior temporal quadrant, and your levator palpebrae is inserted at your upper dorsal plate. So the table here shows you the primary and secondary and tertiary actions of each muscle. So it's easy to remember for your lateral and your medial rectus because it only has one function or one primary function: adduction and abduction. So abduction is lateral movement, medial movement is adduction. So unfortunately, you have to memorize this. So know the function of each muscle, whether its primary action is adduction, abduction, depression, elevation, extorsion, or intorsion. So what is torsion? So torsion is just rotation of the eye. So when you say extorsion, the eye is externally rotated. Intorsion, your eye rotates inwards. So if you have classmates who are good at rolling their eyeballs, then you would know which muscles are functioning. Okay, so in this table you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So So the levator palpebrae superioris also is included as your extraocular muscle. Okay, so most of these muscle functions would be discussed as we learn more about eye diseases. Now, for patients who are cross-eyed, now for patients who have nerve dysfunctions, then we would be discussing further. So for now, I'm not gonna expound, no, but at least know these muscles have different functions and try to get to know them. So the blood supplies for your extraocular muscles are your ophthalmic artery, lacrimal, and intraorbital arteries. And your innervations are the cranial nerve 3. No? This innervates all the extraocular muscles except for two muscles, lateral rectus and superior oblique. Okay, so lateral rectus is innervated by your cranial nerve 6 or obtusans nerve, and then your superior oblique by your cranial nerve 4 or trochlear nerve. What we usually say is for innervation is all three except for SO4 LR6. So that means superior oblique, cranial nerve 4, lateral rectus, cranial nerve 6. So in vernacular, you just say LAHIRA, LAHIRA, 6 letters, lateral rectus, cranial nerve 6. Okay, so all muscles are innervated by cranial nerve 3 except for SO4 LR6. Okay. Any questions? No questions, clarifications? Okay, so if not, this is a very short lecture and I hope everybody has a nice weekend. So, no questions? So if not, next Monday, it's probably going to be a Zoom lecture.